Thank you, Ms. Ayoubi, for your time. How do you see women's rights in Afghanistan with the completion of 6 months of Taliban's rule and control over Afghanistan?
Thank you so much. Yes, every day I hear stories of women in Afghanistan being killed, being raped, or families selling their daughters. And which 6 months ago, these women were free, and now there is nowhere for them to go.
Uh, More than 220 Afghan women's rights advocates or activists signed a letter to the US President Biden that is delivered on Tuesday, February 15th. What is in the letter?
Yeah, actually, as I mentioned earlier, that what is really happening in the country in response to this devastation, as you mentioned, also over 220 Afghan women rights advocates, including 4 former members of the parliament, have signed a letter to President Biden urging him to support the global treaty ending violence against women and girls. Because most of these signatories came from Afghanistan, plus 22 other countries that around the world that many were forced to flee to be displaced during the last summer during the takeover of the Taliban.
Also in the letter, you and your fellow activists have called for a comprehensive international convention on violence against women at the UN level. If you could kindly elaborate on that part, what does it mean?
Yes, actually, one of the violence against women is not only in Afghanistan, but also everywhere else. I mean, globally, women are suffering. 1 in 3 women, according to the World Health Organization, 1 in 3 women worldwide is impacted by violence, and particularly with the COVID pandemic. The COVID pandemic has intensified violence against women. So we were forced to flee to be displaced during the last summer during the takeover of the Taliban.
Also in the letter, you and your fellow activists have called for a comprehensive international convention on violence against women at the UN level. If you could kindly elaborate on that part, what does it mean?
Yes, actually, one of the violence against women is not only in Afghanistan, but also everywhere else. I mean, globally, women are suffering. 1 in 3 women, according to the World Health Organization, 1 in 3 women worldwide is impacted by violence, and particularly with the COVID pandemic. The COVID pandemic has intensified violence against women. So therefore, this letter is that to President Biden, because he has been a champion in protecting women and girls in the U.S. From violence, but particularly with his leadership on Violence Against Women Act. Now, this letter is also urging President Biden to be a leader ending violence against women globally by calling this treaty.
So as an Afghan women's rights activist, what are your demands currently from the international community and the UN?
The demand is actually one of the reasons that we are calling for this treaty, because first of all, we don't expect Taliban to sign this treaty, but the treaty development is our best chance for achieving change for the women and girls in Afghanistan, because as we are already seeing that Muslim nations are putting a pressure on Taliban to respect women's rights.
So Taliban leaders are desperately seeking world's recognition of their government. They also claim that they have met most of their requirements and the conditions that were set for them. Do you think they have met the conditions? Do you think the world should recognize their government?
I think, as I mentioned earlier, that if the Taliban are not recognizing and not respecting women's rights, I think they will be significantly go to isolation. that's one of the reasons that if the international community is putting the demand in conditions on the Taliban to respect the women's rights, to reduce the violence against women, and be accountable for their actions, and make the perpetrators and those who are violating violence against rights of women, then definitely there will be otherwise there shouldn't be any recognition, because our demand is that the women's rights matter. Afghan women rights, Afghan women lives matters. So therefore, the recognition should only come when the Taliban are respecting women's rights. And particularly, as I mentioned earlier, if they're not even uh, uh, collaborating or supporting any international binding document like a global treaty that our demand is, then definitely they will face increased isolation, and that's why I think one of the reasons that I feel as a women's rights activist from the country that the international community should put women's rights as a condition and other human rights violation as a condition for the Taliban recognition.
Thank you for your time, Ms. Ayoubi, and good luck.
Thank you so much.